Good morning. My name is SIneh. I'm the Director of HR here at Locus Innovations. And I am going to do a presentation for you this morning here at Locus where I'm going to be reviewing some literature and taking an evidence-based management approach on some situations that are going on here at Locus. The HR department here at Locus has been noticing an increase in attrition in the last couple of months, and that caused some concern for us. So we dug a little deeper and we looked into the exit interviews, and we found that quite a few of those employees that were leaving us were leaving, according to their exit interviews, based on our lack of providing work-life balance initiatives. Well, that really concerned us, and we wanted to look at that a little bit more. So as I embarked on this, I wanted to take an evidence-based management approach. And the first thing with an evidence-based management approach is that you need to ask a question. So my question is, how can Locus Innovation improve retention with the implementation of work-life balance initiatives? And again, it may be that we don't even implement them, but we wanted to look into creating that possibility for our employees. So again, I wanted to use an evidence-based management approach to this. So why should we use evidence-based management or EBM and incorporate that into our practices? Well, evidence-based management derives from principles, from research evidence, and translates them into practices that solve organizational problems. That's from Russo 2006. Russo goes on to say also that we learn about cause and effect connections in professional practices. EBM will isolate the variations that measurably affect desired outcomes to create a culture of evidence-based decision making and research participation. We use information sharing communities to reduce the overuse, underuse, and misuse of specific practices. It just clarifies those for us. It builds decision supports to promote practices the evidence validates, along with the techniques and artifacts that make the decision easier to execute or perform. So we take the information that we learn from these articles from others and other organizations, and we put it together, and we can use those to move forward with our decisions. So I have taken 2 systematic reviews in order to prepare this presentation. A systematic review is a review of evidence on a clearly formulated question that uses a systematic and explicit methods to identify, select, and critically appraise relevant primary research. It also extracts and analyzes data from the studies that are included in the review. The methods used must be reproducible and transparent. And we want that so that if we decide, since this has already been researched, if we decide to go forth, we have something to start off with, to use, some type of documentation. Well, I looked at 2 different systematic reviews in order to prepare this presentation. One from Demensis and Kelleher called Flexible Working and Performance, a systematic review of the evidence for a business case. And the other is by Vandervoort, Power, and Veldhoven, called Employee Wellbeing and the HRM Organizational Performance Relationship, a review of the quantitative data. So in order to critique or analyze the systematic reviews, we have to have some type of criteria. And so the criteria I've used was TPUPIS. TPUPIS stands for transparency. Is it open to scrutiny? Can it be reproduced? Accuracy. Is it well grounded? Is the information correct and true with the methodology? Purposivity. Is it fit for purpose? Utility. Is it fit for use? Does it work for us? Propriety. Is it legal and ethical? And accessibility. Is it intelligible? Is it clear? Can we read it? Can we understand it? And specificity. Does it meet the source specific standards? Well, I took the TPUPIS criteria and I did comparisons between the two articles. I rated each category of the TPUPIS either strong, good, fair, or weak. So looking at transparency, which again, and that's pretty much whether the process of knowledge and creation is open to outside scrutiny. On the Vandervoort et al. Article, I only rated it fair. It had double inclusion in studies, there were 36 studies used, and it relied on data points which were never clearly specified or explained what they meant. So that was a point of concern for me. On the Demensis and Kelleher, the table, I rated that strong. The tables provided significant information on each of the included studies and the percentages of them that were related to the different research points. It had 148 studies, and the data could be easily reproduced in each of the studies. We moved on to accuracy. Now, accuracy determines whether knowledge claims are supported by the data or information on which they are based. For the Vandervoort et al. Article, again, fair. They only used quantitative studies were used, so there was no meta-analysis of the information. On the Demensis and Kelleher, I rated theirs good. The evidence came from various studies that included qualitative, quantitative, and meta-analysis, and even some gray literature that was included in there as well. Purposivity. On the Vandervoort et al., again, fair. The competing perspectives in that research question made it unclear exactly what they were trying to achieve with this study. The result of that is included in the discussion where they state that the main conclusion from the review is that the appropriate perspective on employee well-being depends on the type of well-being that is studied. Well, that was very confusing, and back it didn't really give me any clear answers. On the Demensis and Kelleher, I rated them good. The review clearly addressed its question, and that was found in the methodology section, examining the link between flexible work arrangements and both organizational and individual performance, as it stated it was going to do. Utility. And utility is whether the knowledge is generated is useful answer for the question posed. And for us, for utility, is how is it going to help us? Does it work for us? Well, the Vandervoort et al. Again was weak. It didn't speak directly to flexible work arrangements, some of the things that we're looking at, and it did not address specifically employee retention. And I was looking for that tie as well. The Demensis and Kelleher, I rated that strong. It spoke specifically to flexible work arrangement. It provided additional information on organizational employee performance as it relates to FWAs, which may be useful in further study or if we decide to move on with implementing any type of flexible work arrangements. We want to know how it's going to affect the organization and the employee performance as well. Propriety. Both of these were rated good. The reviews appear to be legal and ethical. I'm going to state, while the details of all the studies included are not available, the information shared appears to support the participants were informed and the information was protected. And it was the same for the Demensis and Kelleher. Accessibility. Accessibility, whether the knowledge has been presented in a way that meets the needs of the knowledge user, such as whether it's easy to read and understand. Well, for the Vandervoort et al., that was weak. The competing perspectives in the research question made it unclear exactly what they were trying to achieve with the study. It was difficult to understand to which perspective they were referring to throughout the article, and then what were the specific aspects of HRM. It appeared everything was included. Any type of benefit was included in HRM, so it wasn't specific to the FWAs that we needed. In the Demensis and Kelleher, I rated that strong. Each informational link was clearly identified, explained, and documented. I could understand exactly what they talk about and what they were linking it to, whether it was FWAs and organizational performance or employee performance. It was very clear. Specificity. Whether the knowledge meets the specific standards that are associated with that type of knowledge. In the Vandervoort et al., it was good. The knowledge standards were met for that review, and exactly the same for the Demenzes and Kelleher. The knowledge standards were met for this review. They each talked about what they proposed to talk about, and it was specific to that information. Comparison of the articles, I definitely chose to focus on the Demenzes and the Kelleher article. The findings in that systematic review showed to be reasonable and portray a valid basis for claims of the advantages of FWAs when implemented with reasonable diligence and documented protocols. I think that will help us in the future. Again, not information I was looking for right now, but looking at that, the ties to organizational and employee performance will help us down the road as well. Implications for management presented in the review are plausible in the decision to move forward with flexible working arrangement initiatives here at Locus. The findings expressly and clearly laid out the positive reasons for implementing such a program. My recommendations are as follows. My first recommendation is that we use HR surveys to current employees to determine which work-life balance options could potentially make a positive impact on their work-life balance. In the studies, or in the systematic review, there's various forms of work-life balance. We need to understand what constitutes work-life balance. Well, we'll survey the employees to see what they think it is. I think HR needs to do additional research as well to determine what options are out there that we can present to them as possibilities. My second recommendation is that the stakeholders review the survey results and determine which ones could be feasibly offered with appropriate training at all levels. Training is critical here. We have a management piece that's also part of this. We need the managers and the leadership within the organization to come into agreement on this and to support this. So we need to make sure, and they're not going to do that unless we have some training to make sure that they're comfortable with anything like that. HR needs to create a flexible work plan and policy to ensure consistency. We need to document a business plan, a flexible work plan and policies so that everybody understands what the guidelines are. And my third recommendation is that we implement the recommended options with a test group to determine if there are any additional concerns such as training, communication, or employee performance need to be addressed prior to them having access to these type of benefits. We want to evaluate it and address the results, and then evaluate again, reevaluate, and address the results again. I believe that Lotus will benefit from implementing selected work-life balance benefits. Additional evidence-based management research is necessary to determine exactly which ones could potentially work for our organization. We need to ensure that we have tools in place to support our leadership and managers, as this is not part of our current organizational culture, and we would need to look at that as well. I thank you for your time.